Imagine a world where literally every single mistake you make demands a severe, immediate penalty. Hey everyone, today we're unpacking the deep psychological layers of a gripping narrative called The Punishment. Let's dive straight into this explainer. This isn't just your standard strict parent and rebellious teenager trope, you know? It's actually a profound look into guilt, trauma, and how the burdens we flat out refuse to put down eventually crush the people we love the most. We're going to explore the psychological conflict at the very heart of this story, tracking how a rigid demand for discipline ultimately collides with an unfathomable tragedy. Listen to this chilling philosophy. If you don't pay for your mistakes, you'll never learn to avoid them. This is the mindset of Giora, the father in our story. And, it sounds almost perfectly logical on the surface, right? It's the classic justification for tough love. But as we'll see in this explainer, this mindset sets an incredibly dark thematic baseline. Because you have to ask yourself, what happens when the price of a mistake is simply way too high to pay? Chapter 1. An Unforgiving Father, the Architecture of Discipline. To really understand the tragedy that unfolds, we have to look at the suffocating contrast between Giora and his teenage daughter, Ariella. On one side, we have Ariella's reality. She goes to a party, stays out late, her phone dies, and she hitches a ride home. You know, typical, albeit risky, teenage rebellion. But Jora's worldview? Completely different. He firmly believes actions require severe, manufactured consequences. When she gets home, he doesn't just ground her. No. He demands she take off her pants, grabs a pair of red scissors, and violently shreds her clothes right in front of her mother, claiming he's teaching her a lesson about how men will view her. It's an extreme, almost clinical application of control that's just masquerading as parenting. And Giora's absolute obsession with control specifically targets time. Right after shredding her clothes, Giora forces Ariella to stand outside in the dark until exactly 6 a.m. But it doesn't stop there. The very next morning, he stands over her with a literal stopwatch, demanding she make her bed perfectly in exactly 60 seconds. When she fails, he coldly resets the watch. "You need to learn the value of time and accuracy," he tells her. He's not just raising a child here, he's relentlessly drilling a soldier. Chapter 2. The Tragic Mistake, From Manufactured to Real. So up to this point, Giora has manufactured punishments for pretty petty infractions, but the dynamic is about to violently shift. Ariella and her mother, Nava, are out for a drive. Ariella is frustrated. She feels totally stifled by her father's rules and begs her mother to let her practice driving, really pushing against those strict boundaries Giora has set. Nava, who usually just enforces her husband's rules, uncharacteristically gives in, telling her daughter, "I don't believe I'm saying this, but I'll let you drive on the way back." It's a rare moment of mother-daughter bonding, just a brief, much-needed respite from Giora's suffocating discipline. But unfortunately, that brief rebellion ends in utter catastrophe. While driving, Ariella loses control on a dirt road. The car rolls. The aftermath is just jarring and so sudden. Nava is thrown into a coma, hovering right between life and death. The family's fragile equilibrium is entirely shattered in an instant. And immediately, the crushing weight of guilt falls squarely onto Ariella's shoulders. She was behind the wheel. She pushed her mother to break the rules. It's that terrifying moment we can probably all relate to on some level, when a small, everyday rebellion results in a totally irreversible catastrophe. And this forces a truly terrifying psychological inversion. Think about it. What happens when the ultimate mistake is made? For her entire life, Ariella has been conditioned to expect an immediate, severe punishment for every minor error. But now, she's made a mistake so massive, so completely devastating, that traditional discipline completely fails to cover it. The story psychologically flips right here. Chapter 3. The Search for Punishment, the Downward Spiral. This brings us to the deeply disturbing psychological fallout of the accident. When Ariella finally faces her father after the crash, she's expecting his wrath, right? She's expecting the red scissors or the stopwatch, but instead he delivers this totally devastating line: "I can't think of any punishment that will help." He refuses to punish her. And this unexpected grace, it doesn't comfort Ariella at all. It destroys her. Because Giora has wired her brain to require penance for absolution. His refusal creates this massive psychological vacuum. Her immense guilt desperately needs somewhere to go. This psychological vacuum triggers a terrifying sequence of self-flagellation. Ariella literally runs away to find her own punishment out in the real world. Step 1, she wanders into a restricted farming area and gets her foot caught in a heavy metal animal trap. When a young farmer named Ben tries to help, she actually fights him off, saying she wants to stay in the trap. Step 2, she later locks herself inside an industrial floral greenhouse where the temperature is barely above freezing, basically inviting hypothermia, just begging to sit there and suffer. And finally, step 3, she hitches a ride with a group of aggressive men, willingly getting into a car with a predator who plies her with alcohol. She accepts this horrific danger because her broken mind genuinely believes she deserves to be ruined.
Chapter 4. Echoes of Past Trauma. The Father's Secret.
But we have to ask, why did Giora build this architecture of guilt in the first place? Well, it all comes down to transgenerational trauma. This is the psychological transfer of trauma and guilt from one generation to the next, which often manifests in overcorrection or extreme control. It's both fascinating and terrifying. Psychological studies show that profound, unaddressed guilt doesn't just fade away. It actually rewires our biological stress responses and alters how we parent, turning a desire to protect into a rigid compulsion to control. Giora's strictness, his lack of warmth, his intense obsession with rules, it isn't just some quirky personality trait. It's a glaring, flashing red light symptom of his own deeply buried, unaddressed past. While Ariella is hiding at the farm, she learns a horrifying truth from Ben, that young farmer. Ben plays an old tape of his deceased father, a soldier who died 20 years ago in a military accident. And the accident happened because his commanding officer arrived late. That commanding officer, it was Giora. The dead soldier's family haunted him with a single, brutal question. Had you arrived 1 minute earlier when it happened? You didn't know a commander has to be on time? This changes absolutely everything. Giora's obsession with 6 a.m., his stopwatch, his frantic need for accuracy, it all stems entirely from the agonizing fact that his own tardiness cost a man his life. This massive revelation completely reframes their entire dynamic. Giora's stated goal was always about teaching his daughter the value of time, but his psychological reality? He was endlessly punishing his family and himself for his own fatal delay 2 decades ago. Giora has essentially been trapped in his own psychological greenhouse, his own animal trap, for 20 years. He just dragged his wife and daughter in there with him. Ariella's current downward spiral is this perfect, tragic mirror of her father's internal state.
Chapter 5. Breaking the Cycle. Grace over Penance.
This is where the physical search for Ariella transforms into a deeply psychological journey. Giora manages to pull Ariella's phone coordinates and tracks her down just in the nick of time. He pulls her from the car, rescuing her from a truly predatory and dangerous situation. But the physical rescue is secondary to the emotional one here. As she breaks down in the dirt, screaming that the accident is all her fault and that she'll have to live with it forever, Giora finally abandons his need to control and punish. Looking at his sobbing daughter, he recognizes his own painful reflection in her guilt. He finally sees that demanding penance is destroying her in the exact same way it destroyed him. He embraces her and asks her a desperately poignant question. What would you rather do? Run away from it? Search for punishment all your life? You want to be like me? It is just a remarkably powerful moment of vulnerability. By admitting his own brokenness, by pointing out the utter futility of lifelong self-punishment, Giora finally makes a choice to break the cycle of generational trauma. He replaces the demand for discipline with a plea for mutual forgiveness. And this leaves us with a profound question to wrap up on. If extreme discipline only creates a toxic, replicating cycle of guilt, is true justice found in punishment or in the courage to forgive? The punishment shows us that while yes, we absolutely must take responsibility for our mistakes, forcing ourselves or our children to perpetually suffer for them doesn't fix the past at all. It really only steals the future. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Take this question with you and keep seeking to understand the why behind the behaviors of those around you. See you next time.